If you're going to build a decent local recycling industry, local source of raw materials, local recycling and local use of the finished product, then you've got to stop the export of all of those raw materials.
Welcome to the Sustainability Action Podcast. My name is Pedro Pereira and I'm here as the lead of the Sustainability Action Society at the Capital Club Dubai. This podcast is about making sustainability as part of your business. And the episode today will be about how we can make sustainability work in real life. We are the voice of sustainability. So let's deep dive into today's episode.
Hello and welcome. My name is Nadia Boumeziout. Today we talk to Karl Feilder, CEO of Neutral Fuels, about biofuels, alternative fuel sources, and other insights he has to share about sustainability. Hello, welcome.
Hello, Nadia.
So, my first question to you would be, what motivated you to start a biofuel company in a petro state? And what challenges did you face?
Well, quite a few people thought I was mad, but actually I had some better theories than that. We did a project with Dubai government in 2008 looking at the sustainable options for transportation for the logistics sector of Dubai. And we looked at using the new metro that was being built then at night times for moving freight. We looked at electrification, we looked at hydrogen fuel cells, we looked at LPG, we looked at all sorts of different alternatives. We came to the conclusion that for the transportation sector, biofuels was simply the best answer. It's well established as a technology, been used everywhere since 1938. Everybody understood the chemistry. And so we came to the conclusion, this is our recommendation. And that's when they thought I was mad. They said, you can't possibly be suggesting this. This is the fossil fuel capital of the world. I said, well, you know, the future's coming and we have to look to the future. We've got a lot of waste here. We can convert that waste into fuel. So let's have a go. And I said, well, if you get me permission, I'll build it. And after about 6 months, the CEO came back, this is the CEO of Dubai Economic Department, FDI. He said, Karl, I've got some good news for you and some bad news. The good news is you have permission to be the first licensed biofuel facility in the whole of the Middle East. The bad news is you may not fail. Okay, deep breath time. Go and talk to my bank manager, and we put the money in and we built the first factory here. Went live just the end of 2010, and it's been absolutely rock and roll ever since. It's just incredible. The support we've had from the government's been fantastic. No money, but lots and lots of emotional support and lots of political support, and that's actually more useful.
But that's actually great to see in an oil-rich country to get that support from the government as well.
Oh, it's amazing. We've recently built the first biofuels facility in Abu Dhabi. So we just opened our factory there. In order to do that, we had 4 government ministers supporting us. I mean, in most countries, you can't even get a meeting with a government minister. Now we've got 4 of them pushing us to be successful. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I think that's so amazing about the UAE and their vision. So my understanding is that biofuel can only be used for heavy trucks to replace diesel. Is that correct?
So the product that we make is a biodiesel, and it's made by taking waste cooking oils, whether that's from a factory, from a commercial kitchen, or from an individual restaurant. We convert that cooking oil into a biodiesel. It's almost the same as regular diesel, except it's a bit better. It runs smoother in the engine. It gives slightly better fuel consumption. The engine runs a bit quieter. Therefore, the engine runs a bit longer. And we find that this is a wonderful alternative replacement for diesel. There are alternative biofuels, such as bioethanol, but those would require that you have some sort of starchy material to start with. So typically in the States, it's made with sweet corn. You could make it from sugarcane, but we wouldn't be making that here in the Middle East.
And you don't require any changes to the engine. It's just simply can replace the diesel that they usually use.
It's what we call a drop-in replacement fuel. We're coming up in December this year with 20 million kilometers with McDonald's fleet running on only our biofuel. So for the last 10 years, they've been running only on biofuel, no fossil fuel at all. And we're approaching 20 million kilometers with no problems with the engines, slight improvement in fuel consumption, and with a very happy customer.
How does the cost compare to diesel?
Well, sitting here today, I looked the numbers up before we came. So today, and it's funny, diesel is actually quoted internationally in dollars per ton, not in barrels of oil or anything.
All right.
So diesel today internationally is $630 per ton. The European price for biodiesel today is $2,100 a ton. It's more than 3 times the price of normal diesel in Europe, which is the biggest market. The strange thing is that most European biodiesel is made with waste material that did not originate in Europe. And this is one of the biggest scandals of the entire sustainability world, that the biggest drive for sustainability is actually causing deforestation in other parts of the world and is actually dragging waste material, which is our raw material, out of countries that are committed to Paris Agreement climate reduction and reducing their chances of being able to reduce their own carbon footprint. Let me just try that one more time just so that everybody got it. We need to convert our waste into fuel here locally, but that waste is being sold into Europe so that they can make a green fuel in Europe, meaning we can't make a green fuel here. So we're recycling about 10% of the UAE's waste oil at the moment. We're successful in India and in other countries in getting a ban on that waste oil from going overseas, and that's what we're seeking here in the UAE. We think we're going to get it fairly soon.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive to export it rather than utilize it within the country.
Well, we're not the only ones. I mean, recently waste steel and waste paper was banned from export because we can recycle it here locally. Glass and aluminium should be following soon as well, because if you're going to build a decent local recycling industry, local source of raw materials, local recycling and local use of the finished product, then you've got to stop the export of all of those raw materials.
True, yeah, makes sense. But your company goes beyond just generating an alternative fuel. Your entire business model is built on, net zero, I believe. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So we believe we have what the MBA students like to call a disruptive business model. So we took a look at the biodiesel industry internationally, and fundamentally it's broken. It's broken because they work from the wrong assumption. The way that the oil and gas industry works is that there are a few countries in the world where there is crude oil, and yet every country in the world wants the finished products, petroleum or diesel or whatever it is. When they started in Europe and North America to build the biodiesel industry about 30 years ago, they copied that model and said, let's assume that there is raw materials in a few places and every place wants to have the finished product. What it turns out is that every city of the world has a source of the raw materials for biofuels, and every city of the world has an offtake for those biofuels. So in our thinking, it doesn't make any sense at all to start shipping this stuff around the world. It requires lots of small production facilities, one for each city, not huge country scale facilities sitting in Germany or in Amsterdam or somewhere else. It doesn't make any sense. It's global warming. It's not European warming and let's forget about the other countries. It's a global problem. And if we all have the chance in our own countries to recycle waste into fuel, then let's do it. So that's what we started with, was an assumption that everybody else was wrong. Quite normal for an entrepreneur to start with that logic, and indeed my wife says that's how I wake up every morning, assuming everybody else is wrong. But it does propel you forwards to think differently, because if we're going to undo 100 years of addiction to fossil fuel, and we've got about 10 years to undo that addiction, we've all got to think differently. We've got to challenge everything. We've got to think about it. So in terms of our business model, we work very closely with the sources of the waste material. So we work directly with restaurants, with hotels. And we thought, actually, we should give them something a little bit better than just giving them a little bit of money for their waste. So we give them data. So when you're cooking, even if you don't cook anything, you heat the cooking oil up and you cool it down, and you heat it up and you cool it down. And the oil starts to break down into other components which are not very nice, some of them. So there is legislation that says that you should only use the oil for 2 or 3 days. And in most countries, that's the rule. If you start cooking stuff in there, then it deteriorates faster. And if you cook bone-in chicken or you cook potatoes, it deteriorates at a different rate. So all of the restaurants in the world have a way of measuring that, but nobody's verifying it for them. So we take the cooking oil from the restaurant, and every time it comes to our factory, any one of our 8 factories now, we analyze the oil and give the results into a cloud server platform so that we can tell the restaurant that particular restaurant was overusing or underusing their oil on this day. This is the quantity and the quality of oil that they produced. So that data they've never had before, and it allows them to optimize their cooking routines and their quality control in the restaurants. That data then follows that oil through our factory. So we know who touched the oil every time through our production process. And then when we finish up with the product at the end, we sell that straight into fleets of trucks or school buses or to generators. So we then put in place a system of fuel management, swipe card based, IoT based, so that we know exactly how much fuel each driver used to drive what distance. So we can do optimization of fuel consumption by driver and by vehicle. All of that information is stored in the cloud and it's all accessible to all of our customers. And we have a control room that sits there, loads of screens on the wall, so that we can monitor that all around the world. And we've now scaled it from 1 facility to 8 facilities. We're scaling from 8 to 20. I expect by the time we get to 20, we will IPO because I want to build 50 of them. And that's our business model.
Fantastic. And I believe that entire business model has been implemented at Expo.
We've implemented what we call a closed loop system at Expo. So we put our special oil containers that we invented because they're recyclable and we can use them and we can track them. They have GPS tracking on them. They communicate the temperature of the oil and the quantity of oil that's in there. They send that up to the internet and we then monitor that. So we can schedule and optimize the collection of those oil containers. The oil containers are collected in the evening. They're brought back to our factory, which is only 5 kilometers away from Expo. We then recycle that into biofuel that then gets put back into the waste collection trucks that go back to Expo to collect more oil for us. It's entirely a closed loop system. And it's what we did with McDonald's. It's what we're implementing in Abu Dhabi. It's what we've implemented at Expo. This closed loop is the best implementation of circular economy. It's just a perfect implementation because there's no third parties involved and there's no extra wasted kilometers involved.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It stays locally and uses all the positions in the loop. That's amazing. I have a question that might be a bit unusual for you, but what's something people seem to misunderstand about you?
Oh, about me? You know, it's difficult. I've been doing this now for 15 years, trying to fight climate change and make a difference. And when I started, I worked on, same as I said before, I'm working on the assumption everybody else was wrong. And I started by thinking, well, actually, there's technologies that are required to reduce climate change, and there's big companies that have caused the problem. And I spent a long time acting as a bridge between those two. And that's what we're doing with the biofuels, and no doubt once biofuels is well established, we'll do something else. What people don't seem to understand about me is that I'm a businessman. I'm not some sort of hippie, the tree hugger who's trying to save the planet. I'm actually trying to save the planet and make a profit for my customers at the same time. Because I recognize that climate change is a business problem. The world governments keep meeting and keep pontificating about it, but to be quite honest, it's a business problem. Business problems are solved by making business decisions. If I can show boards of directors that by choosing this, you will make more profit, then they're going to choose it. Oh, and by the way, it's green. You know, that's what we need to be pushing people towards. What do people misunderstand? They seem to misunderstand me for somebody that actually is a tree hugger. I'm not in the slightest.
Yeah, it's interesting because I would agree sustainability is good for business, and looking into this, it can actually prove to be very beneficial for business. And I think that's a misconception a lot of people have about it. So what's next? What are the plans for the future?
Well, the first thing I have to say is to come back to a question that I didn't answer earlier. So by the time you've implemented all of that closed loop system and you've optimized everything, you've minimized your carbon footprint of operation, you've put in LED lights, you're using solar where you can, using electric where you can. By the time you've done all of that, you've assessed, you've reduced, and you've replaced your carbon footprint. Even in our business, you're still left over with a little bit of carbon footprint. So what we then do is we then plant trees directly. We have a little forest in South Africa where we're planting indigenous trees, don't require water, don't require fertilizing, and they will grow for the next 100 years and directly sequester. They will directly store the carbon footprint that we create every year. I want every company to have a strategy like that. They don't all have to plant trees. They can come up with other ways of doing it, but assess what your carbon footprint is and measure it in numbers to 2 decimal places. There's a very good project called the Science-Based Targets Initiative, which helps people with coming up with methods to measure things. Measure it. Come up with strategies to reduce it. Work out ways of replacing it. Don't start replacing things with solar panels until you've reduced your consumption, because then you're just wasting solar panels. So assess, reduce, replace. And when you've done all that, please go and buy something to offset your carbon footprint. I see absolutely no reason for companies to say we're going to be net zero in 20 years' time, 30 years' time. That's just lack of ambition. 20 or 30 years' time means after I've retired from the company, after I've left the board of directors, after I'm no longer CEO anymore. This means I'm going to create the world's biggest problem and give it to my successor. That's just a cop-out. It's cowardice. What we need is some more courageous leaders. We need people to say, you know what, we're going net zero and we're going to do it in the next 2 or 3 years. It's going to be painful. Shareholders, sorry, it's going to be a little bit painful, but we're going to do it. And you know what, that little bit of carbon footprint that you're planting trees for will reduce over time as the rest of your processes get less and less carbon intensive. That's what is next going to happen. The world is committing to net zero. We've seen the UAE fantastically commit to net zero, the first of the states in the Middle East to make that commitment. Now what we need to do is businesses to follow the lead from government. Businesses need to declare net zero, to declare that it's going to happen in a really short time frame, not 2050, not 2040, not even 2030. And let's get on with it. Let's be courageous.
Agreed, agreed. So the government committing to net zero is a big target and goal, and obviously that cannot be achieved by the government alone. Companies will have to step up. And so what would you say is something companies can do today to become part of that journey and really support the government in achieving that? Not only supporting the government, but also for themselves, improving their business models and achieving those objectives.
I think the first thing is one of realization. We used to say education, but I don't think it's education anymore. I think it's realization, if you sit on top of one of those companies, that you do not have a choice anymore. This has to happen. The only question is, are you going to make it the problem of your successor, or are you going to do something about it now? So the first step has to be realization at board level that this is not optional. Then the question is, if it's not optional, how are we going to implement it? When are we going to implement it? How are we going to cost it? Everything to do with climate change is about numbers. It's all about numbers. So get the best numbers people in your company to do the numbers. I suggest a combination of accountants and engineers. Really good combination. Calculate the numbers and then get on with it.
Thank you, Mr. Feilder, for your visit today, for sharing these insights that are really actionable and I believe that every business can implement. And please, everybody know that Mr. Feilder is a rock star as well and does music about sustainability, and maybe you want to share a little more about that.
Well, my new album, which is my second album, is coming out before Christmas. It's called Zeitgeist. You'll be able to pick it up on iTunes or on Spotify or some of the other platforms as well. Some of the music you'll hear in the background of this as well, but it's all about sustainability and it's all about using a different means to communicate the same message. I want to use rock, I want to use speech, I want to use broadcast media, I want to use social media, everything possible to get this message out because it's all about our children's children.
Thank you.